I got this set for free off Facebook Marketplace. It was in pretty good shape. Well, almost. The tops were completely coming off, but other than that, it was okay. Hi everybody, welcome to another makeover. The way pieces were built made me think that they were old IKEA pieces, but I'm not too sure because I googled and I couldn't find any information. All I could tell that they were painted and I had no idea what was under that paint. I also had no idea what I was doing with this piece, so as usual, I started with cleaning. I knew for sure that the legs were solid wood, and I could see the wood grain through the layers of the paint on the top. I was hoping that there wasn't just the laminate with the wood grain, but real wooden veneer, so I could keep the top and the legs wooden and paint the rest. To test my theory, I applied a paint stripper to the top, and in about 5 minutes, I was ready to strip the paint. Under this white latex paint, I found some type of a dark finish that was probably original finish of the dresser and it looked like laminate. But I still had this feeling that it might be the veneer, so I decided to trust my gut and switch to sanding. In case there was a veneer, I had to be as gentle as possible, so instead of starting with 100, I started with 120 grit sandpaper. It took me a little bit longer, but I wasn't risking of burning through the veneer. And bingo, it was the veneer. As far as I'm concerned, it was a rubber wood veneer, but I might be wrong. I wasn't trying to remove all the old finish with 120, but I did as much as possible and then switched to 180. I'm gonna tell you the secret why I kept going with sanding even if I wasn't sure if there was a veneer. Because I was sure. I already did all sanding with the nightstand. I disassembled the whole thing and I sanded the top and the legs so I knew where was the solid wood and where was the veneer and where wasn't a veneer. The edges of the top I just scuff sanded with 180 because there was no veneer on them, it was MDF. And while I was sanding, I finally came up with the idea of what I wanted to do with this dresser and the nightstand. Once I was done with sanding, I wiped off the dust and then I put the drawers back into the body. I think that initially all the drawers were meant to be identical and it wouldn't matter what order they were installed in. But someone assembled this furniture at home and as a result, some of the guides ended up slightly misaligned. And if I installed the drawers in the dresser in a random order, they were not always level with each other. So I had to play around with them for a while, and once I found the right order, I numbered all the drawers so I wouldn't mess them up in the future. Then I primed the body of the dresser and I painted it with this light gray color. It almost looks like white, but it has grayish undertone. And so far it looks like everything was going fine, but wait for it. The idea I came up for this dresser was to paint geometric pattern on the drawer front. The pattern I wanted to do was part of this one I found on Pinterest, and I thought it would be looking kind of cool on the dresser. And that's where the long journey of drawing the pattern on the drawer fronts began. Sometimes it was pretty easy, but sometimes it was quite challenging, and I was almost about to give up and start doing something else with this set, but at the end I managed to do that. Then I looked at the drawers and I thought, what if to make some of the parts of my pattern wooden? Wouldn't be a great idea? Someone on my right shoulder was shouting, "Go for it," while someone on my left shoulder was yelling, "Don't do it." But since my childhood, I have had slightly worse hearing in my left ear than in my right one, so I grabbed the parchment paper and started transferring the part I wanted to be wood onto it to use it as a template later. Once I was done, I primed all the drawers And don't worry, I didn't cover any of my drawings I just made because I used the primer that dries clear. Well, almost clear. It dries milky clear, but I still can see through. While the primer was drying, I cut out the templates and I transferred them onto the piece of walnut veneer I had on hand. This veneer I used for the nightstands makeover in one of my previous videos. I will leave the link somewhere on the screen and in the description box for you to check it out if you haven't yet. I ordered this veneer from one of the Chinese marketplaces and I can say that I'm happy with it because it's pretty thin. And without having a hot press or vacuum press, it could be pretty hard to make a perfect application. That is why I am not gonna link or recommend this veneer to anyone. All prep work was done and it was time to paint the pattern. I started with a lighter color and I decided to go mostly free-handed without taping anything because that would be a lot of taping and a lot of waiting. I used all the paint I had on hand. Some of the colors I had pre-mixed, some of them I mixed to get another shade. The point is I didn't go to the store and I didn't buy any new paint and I was pretty happy about it because I always have lots of leftovers and I was glad to finally find the use for them. And every paint I had to apply minimum 2 coats of it and some of them I applied 3, so it took me a while. I also applied 2 coats of the paint to the body of the dresser and I was pretty much done with painting. The pieces of the veneer I had pre-cut, I decided to stain them before I apply them to the drawer fronts because I didn't want to mess up with the paint job I just spent 2 days doing. After letting the stain dry for about 4 hours, I applied the veneer to the drawer fronts using contact cement. This contact cement is very sticky, it dries pretty fast, and I always have a hard time applying it evenly. And since the veneer is very thin, it doesn't hide the unevenness of the contact cement application, and in some areas it highlights it. On small pieces like this, it's not very noticeable, but if you apply this veneer to the larger surface, you'll see it. I figured that applying some heat with an iron could be helpful. I only did it once and it worked, but I want to do it a couple more times to be sure. And only then I will be recommending this veneer to buy. I didn't want the pattern to break between the drawer fronts, so I extended it onto the dividers. Once the paint dried to touch, I flipped the top and started staining. The goal here is to match the color of the walnut veneer. First, I applied the leftovers of water-based wood stain I had on hand, and the color here is the mix of amaretto and American walnut. Once this stain dried, I applied very thin early American wood stain, 1 coat of it, and again let it dry. And on top of it, I applied Minwax gel stain in the color Golden Pecan. The drawer fronts dried for about 24 hours and it was time to apply a top coat. The top coat I applied only to the drawer fronts because here I used different types of paint. Some of the paint was not required the top coat, but some of it was. I had the leftovers of very thin polyurethane in a spray can, and it was just enough to apply 2 coats of this finish to the drawer fronts. For the bodies of the dresser and the nightstand, I didn't do the top coat because the paint that I used was not required the top coat, and I used this paint before without the top coat and it performed perfect. And this is the part of the video called how not to paint the furniture. Well, technically it's how not to mix your paint and not to use this paint to paint your furniture. Because once I applied the top coat, my paint turned out like this. I feel like I need to provide a little background here. I am from Belarus, where we have an access to colorants for paints and we can purchase them to tint paint in any color we want. Of course, we can mix paint at the store, but sometimes it's just more convenient to buy either white or clear base and mix the color we need. Here in Canada, I ran into the problem of not being able to buy colorants. So sometimes in my projects, I cheat. When I need to get a specific shade, instead of buying 10 cans of paint, I either mix the paints I have on hand or I add some water-based food colors. And before you start throwing tomatoes at me, I have to say that this trick always worked until this makeover. My mistake was that in this one, I used a very old food color that I inherited from my husband's mom. I'm not too sure what could be wrong with the food color because it's pretty much the pigment and water, but you can see the result. I have done this so many times, I think I've never shown this in my video, but this is my full confession. I added food colors to the paint and it worked. Until now. Anyway, I had to fix the problem, and there was no way on earth I would go to the store and I would buy 5 cans of paint to repaint the whole thing. I mean, I would have, but first I had to try the idea that popped into my head. I poured some water-based poly into the small containers, and into each container I added the different paints I used for this dresser. The ratio was 3 parts of poly and 1 part of the paint. I couldn't logically explain why this was supposed to work. I just trusted my gut. And I pretty much started painting this pattern again with my polyurethane paint. And it worked. Not 100% in the way I expected it to work. From the distance, the pattern looked like it's a painted pattern. But if you have a closer look, some of the parts, they kind of look like it's a oil painting, like this Vincent van Gogh style painting. Kinda. And I love it. It looks so unique and interesting. I let this poly to dry and then I applied 2 coats of clear polyurethane over it. By that time, the oil-based stain on the top had been already drying for about 48 hours. So I was pretty much ready to apply the top coat, the same water-based polyurethane, and I did 3 coats. Once the top dried, I was ready to put it back. Just in case, I applied some wood glue to the wooden dowels, and I also had those pre-inserted nuts, I believe it's called. We destroyed the part of our old kitchen in the house, and I salvaged those nuts from there. And because it was a little bit awkward, I didn't film the installing process of those nuts, but I did install them. Last step was to install the hardware, and I am reusing the same hardware because I think it suits this piece perfectly. And I did a scratch test on one of the drawers to see how the paint performs, if it's coming off or not, and it passed the scratch test. So with that being said, we are done here. Let me remind you how this set looked before, and I'll let you enjoy the after without my voice in the background. Thank you so much for watching and see you in my next video.